I was fired mid-presentation during a $300 million negotiation. Not in a private office. Not in a quiet HR meeting with tissues on the table. But in front of 12 board members, 5 government officials, and my entire operations team. I was translating a clause I had personally spent 6 weeks crafting when my CEO stood up, straightened his overpriced suit, and said, "Effective immediately, Natalie will no longer be with Link Solutions. Her position has been sunset." Sunset. As if I were some software feature they'd quietly phase out after a product update. The room went silent. No one moved. Not even the waiter refilling tea. I just sat there, frozen not because I was shocked, but because I already knew. I had seen it coming. What Brent didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 2 months ago, I'd started forming something of my own. Not a resume. Not a disparate job hunt. But a structure. A plan. A shell company registered under a name no one at Link would recognize. No LinkedIn page. No press release. Just a private proposal folder, an encrypted phone, and one promise. If they tried to erase me, I would rebuild without them. So I looked up at the boardroom, all of them watching me, waiting for a breakdown. I smiled instead. And I said calm, fluent, deliberate. "Let's take a short recess. I believe there's a new direction to discuss." And in that moment, the story didn't end. It began. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about what happens when the woman behind the curtain decides to step forward. When silence becomes strategy. And when the person they underestimated the most walks away holding every card they never saw coming. Stick around. Because what happens next? It wasn't just a comeback. It was a quiet coup. Natalie Pierce never liked the spotlight. She didn't wear flashy colors. She didn't chase titles. She didn't post inspirational quotes on LinkedIn or clap at every all-hands meeting. What she did quietly, relentlessly, and with terrifying precision was build the backbone of an empire. By the time she was 35, she had opened Link Solutions operations in 3 continents. She spoke 3 languages, fluent English, Arabic, and Japanese, and understood the rhythm of boardrooms from Dubai to Singapore to Seattle. Not because she read management books or attended Ivy League networking mixers, but because she listened, really listened, to the pauses, to the subtext, to the unsaid things in between formal greetings and polished smiles. She wasn't loud, she was thorough. The kind of woman who remembered your assistant's name and your daughter's graduation date. The kind who redlined contracts at 3 a.m. because she knew the exact phrase that could derail a cross-border deal. She never needed applause. What she needed was impact. Natalie had joined Link Solutions in its early days, when the company was still operating out of a shared workspace above a vegan donut shop in Chicago. She was employee number 8. By year 3, she was VP of Operations. By year 5, she was spearheading the firm's expansion into the Middle East, moving her life to Dubai, learning the culture, the etiquette, and more importantly, earning the trust of government partners and legacy logistics firms that had never trusted an American startup before. Her superpower wasn't just cultural fluency. It was presence. The kind of presence that calms a chaotic room without raising her voice. The kind that makes arrogant men underestimate her until the contracts are signed, the ink dries, and their names are nowhere on the press release. She didn't want to be CEO. She didn't want to be the face on the billboard or the voice on the quarterly call. She wanted to build systems that lasted, that respected nuance, and didn't bulldoze their way through unfamiliar markets with ego and empty metaphors. But then Brent Halverson arrived. The golden boy. Brought in by investors to streamline the global strategy. He shook hands too hard, smiled too wide, and called Natalie his cultural compass in board meetings like she was a decorative vase on a coffee table. And slowly, so slowly it began. The invitations stopped. The credit shifted. Natalie found herself being sidelined, reduced to liaison duties, stripped of her decision-making authority in the very markets she built from scratch. But she didn't push back. Not immediately. Because Natalie had learned one thing more powerful than anger, more enduring than outrage. She had learned timing. And, in silence, she began preparing. A single LLC. A quiet pitch deck. A phone call from New York. She didn't know exactly when the betrayal would come, but she knew it would. And when it did, she would not raise her voice. She would rise. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic shouting match. No official demotion. No mass email with the subject line, structural realignment. It was quieter than that. Colder. It began with a calendar invite she didn't receive. A Monday meeting, the kind she used to let gone. Then a strategy session rescheduled without her. A press draft circulated where her name was removed from the list of key contributors. At first, Natalie brushed it off. She told herself it was logistics. Time zones, oversight. But it wasn't. It was deliberate. Brent Halverson, the new CEO's charming in the most performative way possible. He shook hands like a politician and ended every conversation with, "Let's circle back." But behind the faux warmth, he was slowly, methodically redrawing the org chart without ever lifting a pen. He started referring to her as our cultural bridge in meetings. Said it with a smile, as if it were a compliment. But it wasn't. It was containment. A polite way of saying, you're useful for optics, not for decisions. Natalie had spent the last 2 years building Link's presence in the UAE. She negotiated deals in Arabic, fostered government partnerships, and turned hesitant agencies into long-term collaborators. She didn't just represent the company, she was the company, at least in that region. But Brent didn't see that. Or maybe he did, and that was the threat. Because Natalie knew things Brent didn't. She understood context. She had relationships that weren't just transactional, they were built on trust, on nuance, on respect. And that made her dangerous. Not in a rebellious way. In a competent way. And for men like Brent, competence without submission is unnerving. One day, she opened a proposal draft for the new supply chain integration project. It had her formatting, her structuring, her language. But her name wasn't there. Instead, it read, "Prepared by Strategic Growth Team, Oversight by Brent Halverson." She scrolled to the last page. There, washer, signature box deleted. No explanation. No comment. Just gone. Still, she didn't confront him. Because Natalie had learned something crucial over the years. You don't interrupt someone who's handing you a weapon. She watched as Brent continued performing leadership, flashing PowerPoints with vague buzzwords like synergy and cross-market optimization, while completely mispronouncing the names of key clients. She kept a file. Notes, dates, conversations. Subtle slights that weren't worth fighting at the time, but wouldn't go unnoticed later. Every passive-aggressive email. Every praise that came wrapped in condescension. He called her Beckett of the East, once in front of a partner like she was. A novelty act, not a strategist. That was the moment something shifted. She didn't feel humiliated. She felt clear. She wasn't losing power. She was being handed the reason to reclaim it somewhere else. And so, as Brent tightened his grip, Natalie began slipping away. Not out of fear, but out of design. She stopped pushing. She started building. Not louder. Not harder. Just away from him. It happened on a Tuesday. The boardroom was glass-walled, perched on the 42nd floor of a skyscraper in downtown Dubai. The air conditioning hummed low, the kind of cold that never reached your skin, only your bones. On the table were 12 printed proposals, 2 government liaison badges, and a pot of Moroccan mint tea steeping at the center like a prop from a negotiation playbook. Natalie sat at her usual seat, third from the left, closest to the projector. She had been walking the room through the revised integration clause. It was the clause she had personally drafted, line by line, across 6 weeks of back-channel talks. It addressed licensing rights, customs compliance, and dual-language legal protections. It was surgical, clean, bulletproof. And then Brent stood up. She didn't notice at first. Not until the warmth left the room. His chair scraped back with the sharp whine of polished steel on tile. She paused. He smiled. Not at her. At the room. And then, in a tone as casual as if he were commenting on the weather, he said, "Effective immediately, Natalie Pierce will no longer be representing Link Solutions in this capacity. Her role has been sunset." Sunset. The word hit the room like a dropped fork at a funeral. One of the Emirati officials blinked twice. Another froze mid-pour, his teacup tilting just slightly off-center. No one spoke. No one moved. Natalie didn't flinch. Her body didn't jerk. Her eyes didn't widen. Because her brain had gone perfectly still. Not blank. Not panicked. Just still. Like a pool of water before a storm. She turned slowly toward Brent. He wasn't even looking at her. He was addressing the room as if she had already disappeared. As if she were a prop being quietly rolled off stage. And then, to make it worse, he added, "This change reflects a broader restructuring of our leadership. We remain fully committed to transparency and collaboration with our global partners." He folded his hands behind his back like a general who had just declared a victory. Like he thought the room would clap. Natalie exhaled incessantly. She reached for her folder. Her fingers grazed the edge of the document she had spent nights perfecting. She stood. Not in protest. Not in panic. But with purpose. A kind of slow, deliberate motion that made everyone else look like they were rushing. "Apologies," she said quietly, switching to fluent Arabic. "This development was unexpected. Please allow us a short recess to recalibrate expectations." One of the government officials nodded. Another looked at Brent with a raised brow that said everything without needing words. Brent didn't understand Arabic. But he understood the shift in the room. He knew sudden that something hadn't gone according to script. Natalie turned, collected her materials, and walked out of the room. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Like a woman who had just been cut loose. And realized the scissors were in her hand the entire time. Natalie didn't cry. She didn't throw things. She didn't call her sister in Chicago and vent over speakerphone while sipping wine in the dark. She didn't spiral into a 5-hour doom scroll across LinkedIn job boards. Natalie went back to her apartment. She took off her blazer, unclipped her hair, and turned on her laptop. She had been preparing for this. For weeks. Maybe even months. The first whisper came from a contact in New York. A private message. Short, polite. "If you ever go independent, we'd back you, quietly, generously." She didn't respond at the time. Not because she wasn't interested, but because she was watching. Measuring. Waiting. Then came the second message. A white paper sent from a logistics firm in Tokyo. No subject line. No request. Just a quiet nod. "We know what you've built. We'd rather work with you." That's when she opened a blank document. Named it Blueprint, a New Model. And began. She registered a holding company in Delaware under a generic name. Atlas Meridian LLC. No logo. No social media. Just a P.O. box. A minimalist one-pager site with a single tagline. Clarity, culture, control. She bought a separate phone unlisted, untraceable just for outbound conversations. She switched to encrypted email. Every contact logged. Every whisper archived. She didn't steal clients. She didn't have to. She designed value so precise, so tailored, that it didn't look like a pitch. It looked like a solution to a pain they hadn't even articulated yet. One contact in Abu Dhabi told her, "You're the only one who knows how to build a bridge between East and West without turning it into a stage." Natalie didn't smile. She just added his name to a list titled, First 5 Conversations. She created proposal templates from scratch. Drafted onboarding processes in both English and Arabic. Studied export compliance across 8 regions. And when she was done, she put it all in a folder on her hard drive named Glass Exit. Not Plan B. Not emergency. Just Exit. Because she wasn't planning to run. She was preparing to walk. Through the front door. With her head high. And her own keys in hand. So when Brent stood in that boardroom and smiled, thinking he had destroyed her, he had no idea she had already replaced him. Not in title, but in influence. Natalie didn't burn the bridge. She built a better one right beside it, and waited for the world to notice which one was still standing. The room was cold. Not from air conditioning, but from tension. 12 chairs, refilled teacups, and no one speaking. Brent stood near the screen, rambling in vague platitudes about transitioning leadership and maintaining synergy across regions. His voice filled the silence like static. Loud. Empty. Natalie had re-entered the room exactly 12 minutes after the recess began. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask permission to speak. She simply placed her folder back on the table, sat down, and adjusted the mic in front of her. Then she looked at the lead Emirati official, Mr. Ramanan said in fluent Arabic. There has been a shift in representation. Effective immediately, I will be continuing this discussion under new advisement. Brent froze. He didn't understand Arabic, but he understood the ripple in the room. The way Mr. Rahman tilted his head. The way his colleague sat forward. The way a translator, seated in the far corner, stopped taking notes and looked up. Brent leaned over and whispered, "What the hell are you doing?" Natalie didn't answer. She opened her folder. On the top was a new cover sheet. Clean. White. No Link Solutions branding. No legacy logos. Just one name, centered, bold, and still unfamiliar to every executive in that room. Atlas Meridian LLC. Strategic Global Advisory. Beneath it, her name. Her title. Her terms. The same deal Brent had just tried to pitch. Except streamlined. Localized. Respectful of jurisdictional nuances. And revised with an addendum that gave regional partners final veto power. A clause Natalie knew they had quietly requested but never dared demand from Link. She slid the page across the table. Deliberate. Calm. No defiance. No grandstanding. Just presence. All terms remain identical to the previous proposal, she said smoothly. The only change is representation. One of the government advisors scanned the document. He looked at Brent, then at Natalie. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "This feels more aligned." Brent scoffed. "You don't have the authority to speak for Link." Natalie looked at him direct, unblinking. "I'm not speaking for Link anymore," she said. "I'm speaking for myself. And for clients who value execution over ego." That was the moment the room turned. Not with applause. Not with confrontation. But with gravity. With clarity. Mr. Rahman reached forward, tapped the page twice, and nodded to his colleagues. "Let's proceed with this structure," he said. Natalie didn't smile. Not yet. Because she knew what just happened wasn't a win. It was a beginning. Atlas Meridian LLC didn't exist last quarter. But now, it was standing in the room stronger, leaner, untethered. And as Brent tried to salvage the meeting with a half-hearted mention of legal follow-ups, Natalie simply gathered her notes, slid her pen back into her bag, and stood. "This is no longer your room, Brent," she said softly. "You gave it away the moment you mistook silence for surrender." Then she turned to the partners, nodded once, and walked out. Not with bitterness, but with blueprint. She wasn't building empires anymore. She was replacing them. Natalie didn't poach. She didn't call clients in the middle of the night or send dramatic resignation emails. She didn't trash talk Brent or Link Solutions on podcasts or in private circles. She didn't have to. All she did was whisper. Softly. Precisely. At the right moment. It started with a polite email sent from a secure Proton Mail account to an old partner in Singapore. The subject line read, "A quiet alternative." The message was short. 3 sentences, no attachment, no pitch. "If you're looking for strategic continuity, I'm available for discreet consultation." New press, new noise, just results. Let me know if you'd like to talk. By the end of the day, there were 3 replies. All yes. The second wave came through introductions. 1 CFO in Berlin, 1 general counsel in Tokyo, 1 supply chain lead in Sao Paulo. Each had worked with Natalie during her time at Link. Each remembered the same thing. She showed up early. She stayed late. She asked questions no one else had thought to ask. None of them were told to leave Link. They simply stopped responding. Meetings were missed. Timelines slipped. Contracts went unsigned. At headquarters, Brent blamed regional noise. He scheduled emergency Zoom calls. He created new task forces. He hired a consultant to run a global client clarity campaign. Nothing worked. Because Natalie wasn't disrupting. She was replacing. She didn't advertise her. She didn't update her LinkedIn. She didn't even use her full name on proposals. Just N. Pierce, Strategic Director, Atlas Meridian. What she offered wasn't rebellion. It was stability. Executed quietly, in perfect fluency with the cultures and contexts her clients actually cared about. For one Japanese firm, she redrafted an automation clause that had stalled for 9 months under Link. For a Dubai logistics partner, she provided bilingual compliance training materials within 48 hours, something they had begged Link's APAC team for over a year. Every client she spoke to heard the same 3 promises. No corporate theater. No hierarchy games. Just smart, quiet execution. And they followed. One by one. Like marbles rolling off the edge of a cracked glass table. By week 4, Atlas Meridian had 5 retainers, 2 NDAs, and 1 regional exclusivity agreement pending. All without a single public announcement. Meanwhile, Brent was drowning. He emailed clients. No replies. Escalated. He threatened breach of contract. But there was no breach. Because Natalie never touched a Link document. She never reused templates. She never even mentioned the company's name in writing. What she built came from memory, from skill, from relationships. And so, every time Brent tried to trace the leak, he found nothing. No smoking gun. No stolen files. Just absence. Like someone had pulled the gravity out of his system. And it had started to collapse in on itself. By month 2, the board asked for answers. By month 3, investors stopped replying to his updates. Natalie didn't know how bad it had gotten. Because she didn't need to watch the fall. When she was busy designing the replacement. And the best part? She hadn't even launched publicly yet. Brent didn't panic at first. He paced the carpeted executive floor with his usual swagger, sipping iced matcha in a branded Link tumbler. He told the team that it was just a post-restructuring hiccup. He promised the board that clients were realigning expectations. But beneath the surface, the rot had begun. The first real sign came from Jakarta. A client who had once praised Link as irreplaceable suddenly canceled 3 standing meetings without explanation. When the local account manager followed up, the only response was, "We're moving in a different direction." Then came the silence from Tokyo. One of Link's longest-standing partners simply stopped responding. No angry emails. No complaints. Just unread messages piling up like leaves in a storm. Brent started calling people directly. He left voicemails full of cheerful urgency. "Hey, just circling back, excited to move forward." No one called back. His frustration curdled into something darker. He stormed into the strategy wing one morning, tie loosened, eyes bloodshot. "Why aren't we hearing from them?" he demanded. The silence that followed wasn't insubordination. It was confusion. Because the truth was they didn't know. No red flags had been raised. No termination notices filed. It was as if the clients had evaporated overnight, leaving only their absence behind. Internally, chaos bloomed. Junior associates were caught Googling how to pronounce honorifics in Japanese before client calls. A newly hired Mandarin interpreter mistook a client's family name for a product coding, and the entire deal collapsed. Someone finally said the name out loud. Natalie. But Brent dismissed it. She left, he snapped. She's irrelevant. Except she wasn't, because buried in the HR system was a gap. A tiny, crucial administrative oversight. Natalie had been sunset without a final exit form. No NDA. No non-compete. No formal documentation of her termination, which meant legally she wasn't bound to silence. And she knew it. By the time legal found out, it was too late. She had already launched Atlas Meridian behind the scenes. Already locked down advisory roles with Link's most high-value partners. Brent demanded a retroactive contract. The compliance officer said, that won't hold in court. He threatened to sue. The board advised against it. So instead, he pivoted badly. Spun a narrative. He framed the client loss as market turbulence. He ordered a PR team to draft a statement. But no one could confirm what had actually happened. Because there wasn't one big event. There was no memo. No sabotage. Just a slow, steady erosion driven by someone who knew exactly where every weak point was. Natalie hadn't stormed the castle. She had mapped it. And now she was dismantling it, brick by brick, from outside the walls without ever needing to raise her voice. By quarter's end, Link had missed projections in 3 regions. 3 major clients had gone dark. Internal Slack channels turned quiet. And Brent? He was still in his corner office. Still drinking matcha. Still practicing that two-eyed smile. But now, his hands were trembling. Brent thought he could fix it. He thought this was salvageable. All it would take, he told himself, was a firm legal hand. An aggressive cease and desist. A retroactive non-compete. A reminder that the company still had control. So, he called an emergency meeting with legal. 3 lawyers. 1 HR rep. 2 assistants typing every word like it mattered. Brent leaned over the table, knuckles pressed white against the oak. She's taking our clients. That's corporate theft. Sabotage. I want her shut down. The head of legal, a woman named Camila, flipped open her folder. She had been quiet all meeting. She only spoke when facts were airtight. There's a problem, she said. Brent narrowed his eyes. What kind of problem? She slid a paper across the table. This is the offboarding checklist. For Natalie Pierce. Brent scanned it. No signature. No NDA filed. No finalized termination form. Just 2 words. Pending, awaiting executive review. Camila looked up. You insisted on handling her exit personally. HR never received the final packet. No non-compete was processed. No confidentiality clause activated. Brent went pale. Are you telling me she's free? Camila nodded slowly. She owns everything she built. She hasn't violated a single clause because there were none. A silence fell over the room. Note passive silence. Strategic silence. The kind that tastes like metal. Brent tried to recover. Then we make one now. Retroactive. Push it through the system. We'll date it back. But Camila didn't blink. That's fraud. Brent's jaw tightened. His voice dropped. She's dismantling this company. You expect me to just sit here? Camila replied, evenly. She didn't steal anything. She outmaneuvered you. Then, as if on cue, an assistant stepped in holding a printed email. Encrypted. Time-stamped. Sent from Natalie Pierce to HR 5 weeks before the boardroom incident. Subject. Request for updated role clarification and contractual obligations. In the message, Natalie had asked politely, precisely whether her change in title under Brent's restructuring required any amendments to her NDA or non-compete agreement. There had been no reply. She followed up twice. The 3rd email included a Slack message. Just confirming, will legal be sending the updated documents, or should I hold? No one answered. And then, buried in the email thread, a message from Brent. I'll handle this. Let's not clog up legal. Just cut her excessits overreach to get them involved. Dated 48 hours before the firing. Camila closed the folder. She knew. She saw this coming. She built her defense before you ever drew the sword. Brent stood frozen. His empire wasn't just collapsing. It was collapsing legally clean. Natalie hadn't just outmaneuvered him in business. She had outmaneuvered him in compliance. With emails. With timestamps. With intent. There would be no lawsuit. No injunction. No emergency ruling. Because the only person who broke protocol was him. And Natalie? She was already 3 moves ahead. Natalie didn't toast. She didn't pop champagne or post a carefully worded announcement with a gold-filtered headshot and the caption, "Grateful for new beginnings." She didn't feel like celebrating. Not in the traditional sense. Because this wasn't a victory. This was something quieter. Something deeper. This was freedom. She stood in a glass conference room 47 stories above Manhattan. The late afternoon sun spilled in like liquid gold, brushing the edges of the marble table, softening everything. Outside, the city pulsed with motion buses, crosswalks, conversations, ambition. But in here, stillness. A different kind of power. Across from her sat 3 representatives from Shimada Group, flanked by a legal advisor and an interpreter. Except, she didn't need the interpreter. Natalie spoke Japanese. She had spent the last 2 months refining every clause of this deal in both languages. No gaps, no assumptions. The man across the table smiled. "We're honored to finalize this partnership," he said, bowing his head slightly. Natalie returned the gesture. Then she picked up the pen. 1 signature. No fanfare. Just ink on paper. And with that, Atlas Meridian officially secured a multi-year contract. Triple the size of the original Link deal. Multi-region. Full operational autonomy. No middlemen. No politics. Just her. Her name. Her rules. She exhaled as the papers were gathered and the meeting dissolved into polite bows and quiet conversations. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt clear. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. She wasn't trying to win. She wasn't trying to prove Brent wrong, or Link foolish. They were already fading in the rearview mirror. A cautionary chapter in a book she no longer needed to reread. Natalie had discovered something no title could give her. The right to build without permission. To speak without translating herself for someone else's ego. To walk into a room and not have to shrink, or soften, or wait her turn. She didn't need the corner office anymore. She had her own floor. Did it come easy? Number. Did it come cheap? Never. But it came honestly. And that made all the difference. That night, she sat on her balcony with a cup of jasmine tea, the city glittering below like 1,000 quiet conversations. She scrolled past a news headline, Link's Q3 collapse, Brent's administrative leave, investor lawsuits pending. She didn't click. Instead, she opened her calendar and scheduled the next advisory call with a new partner in Seoul. Another quiet opportunity. Another clean beginning. Because Natalie had outgrown war. She wasn't here to burn down the old world. She was here to build something better. And this time, no one would sunset her. Silence is often misunderstood. People think silence means defeat. That if you're quiet, you've surrendered. That if you don't clap back, don't scream, don't retaliate, you must be weak. But Natalie Pierce knew better. She had learned through 1,000 closed-door meetings and 100 misread intentions. That silence isn't surrender. Silence is strategy. It's choosing not to waste your breath where it won't be heard. It's knowing when to speak, when to pause, and when to let others write their own undoing without your help. In a world that rewards noise, Natalie chose clarity. She didn't defend herself when Brent cut her out. She didn't demand to be recognized. She didn't beg for a seat at a table that was already crumbling. She built her own. And she filled it, slowly, with people who spoke her language not just literally, but professionally, ethically, and emotionally. The greatest power she discovered wasn't influence or reach or applause. It was definition. She learned that the most dangerous thing you can do to someone who tries to erase you is simply not disappear, not explode, not retaliate. Just stay visible. Stay steady. Stay undeniably yourself. Because when you stop explaining your worth and start embodying it, people notice. The right people stay, and the wrong ones become background noise. Natalie's story isn't about revenge. It's not about getting even. It's about getting clear. It's about knowing who you are before they try to tell you, and knowing what you bring to the room before anyone tries to take credit for it. There's something radical about quiet confidence, about saying less and meaning more, about letting your consistency speak where your resume can't, about being the calm in the meeting, not the chaos, about letting someone else set the fire while you quietly build the foundation that lasts. Natalie didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She didn't fight for the mic. She waited, and when the noise faded, her voice remained clear, grounded, unmistakable. So if there's one thing to take from her story, it's this. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be first to be right. And you don't have to be seen to matter. But you do have to know who you are, because one day they will try to define it for you. When that day comes, be ready, not with rage, with receipts, with resolve, with a name only you can own. Because true power isn't in proving your worth. It's in never letting anyone else write your story again. The email arrived at 7:41 a.m. New York time. No subject line, no signature. Just a clean white background, 2 short paragraphs, and the unmistakable tone of someone trying to sound in control when everything was already lost. It came from Brent. After weeks of silence, of unraveling, of boardroom implosions and panicked investor calls, he had finally typed the message he swore he'd never send. Natalie didn't open it right away. She was already halfway through her jasmine tea, standing barefoot in the corner of her loft. The city moved quietly below New York, in that golden hour where everyone's rushing but no one's fully awake. And she was calm, not triumphant, not gloating, just calm. When she finally opened the message, it was exactly what she expected. Natalie, in light of recent events, I wanted to personally reach out. We acknowledge that there may have been oversights in the handling of your transition. While the current situation is unfortunate, we believe it's in everyone's interest to move forward professionally and with mutual respect. That said, we would appreciate it if you could confirm whether you're willing to explore a resolution that avoids unnecessary legal escalation. Natalie read the words slowly. Not because they hurt, but because they were familiar. The same tone she'd heard in meetings. The same coded language. Neutral. Strategic. Empty. They were still trying to manage her. Still trying to phrase surrender as diplomacy. Still pretending they had options left. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she walked to her desk. Opened a fresh tab. Typed slowly. Not from anger, but from finality. Her response was short. Brent, thank you for your message. There's nothing left to resolve. Atlas Meridian is moving forward. I wish Link Solutions all the best. Natalie Pierce. No signature block. No title. No attached terms. Just a clean break. She clicked send. Then archived the thread. Not deleted, just moved. Filed under a folder she had labeled weeks ago. Done. Arbly. Because this wasn't about burning bridges. It was about knowing which doors were never meant to be reopened. Outside, horns began to layer into the morning soundtrack. Delivery bikes weaved between cabs. The world spun, as it always had. Natalie shut her laptop. Reached for her blazer. Today, she had a lunch meeting with a partner from Seoul. Then an evening video call with a client in Berlin. Her calendar was full. Not with busyness, but with purpose. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed again. Another email. New sender. New opportunity. She smiled. Just slightly. And in that moment, not as a consultant, not as an executive, not even as a strategist, but simply as Natalie Pierce, she knew. The old chapter hadn't ended with an explosion. It had ended with a single, quiet click. And that was enough.